Hello, my name's Georgina Stafford and I'm Head of Admissions at Path Education. Welcome to the first in a series of webinars looking at how we can help you to maximise your chance to secure admission to your chosen university. This webinar focuses on UK applications and the UCAS process and will tell you everything you need to know to ensure that you submit the best possible application that you can. Having graduated from the University of Oxford, I've spent the last 15 years working in some of the UK's leading independent schools, focusing on supporting in excess of 1,500 students to submit applications to UK universities. Since joining Path, we focus on supporting students from all over the world to achieve their objectives within the UK university landscape and enjoy a 95% success rate in placing students at their first choice university. This webinar then is designed to help you maximise your chance of gaining admission to your first choice university. And it's going to be divided into three key sections. First of all, an overview of what the UK university landscape looks like, what universities there are, how to understand ranking systems, and to really explore what your options might be. Secondly, we will look at the UK application process. What do you actually need to do in order to secure a place? And thirdly, how do you stand out? How do you maximise your chances? This is where we feel that we can really add value to your application. By drawing on our extensive experience, we can let you know what UK university admissions officers are really looking for and how to make sure that your application showcases those skills. So first of all then, the UK university landscape. First of all, let's consider the universities themselves. The universities in the UK are divided into quite a hierarchical system. There is a definite pecking order in terms of what universities are considered to be aspirational and desirable, and perhaps which ones are slightly more accessible. At the top of that heap are Oxford and Cambridge, commonly referred to in the UK as Oxbridge. Below that is a group of universities called the Russell Group, and then you have the rest. Now, that triangular diagram is very much divided into three clear layers. It's not quite that simple. There are certain courses at certain universities that perhaps blur some of those lines. If, for example, you are looking to apply for engineering, then I would absolutely be classing somewhere like Imperial College London in the same bracket as Oxford and Cambridge. If you were looking to apply for economics, then LSE would also be in that very top tier. The Russell Group as well is not necessarily an exact science in terms of the next run down of universities. There are a number of non-Russell Group universities, for example St Andrews, which was recently voted the UK's #1 university by the Guardian's League table, that you would definitely say is in that second tier, but it's not a Russell Group member. So yes, there are broad categories. Yes, there is a broad hierarchy, but there are perhaps a few more shades of grey. I think the second thing to take away in terms of the UK university landscape is the fact that there's very much a national focus. And this is quite different from some other areas of the world where applications can be quite localised and most people are applying to a university near their home, or at least in kind of the American terminology, in-state. In the UK, most people approach applications with a kind of national focus and a national view and are prepared to move anywhere in the country to access the right university for them. The key question you need to ask yourself then is, where do you fit within the system? What do you aspire to do? Where do you aspire to go? And actually, probably in most cases, your application will involve universities from more than one of these tiers. That you perhaps will have aspirational choices in that top band, most of your choices in the middle band, and perhaps one from the bottom, or some combination of the two. Ultimately, any university application is about being strategic, and thinking about having a spread of options and a spread of choices is really, really important, as well as making sure that you are focused on targeting your key chosen first choice institution. So the Russell Group, this is a phrase I was using to describe that second tier, and it's a phrase that's used a lot when you're talking about UK universities. Newspapers, the media, the universities themselves will herald this idea of the Russell Group. And it's become a bit of a shorthand for the best universities in the UK. Your Oxford and Cambridge are members, LSE, UCL, Durham, Bristol, those leading universities are all Russell Group institutions. But it is a little bit of a misnomer. And I think this is something that can sometimes lead people to fixate on it in a way that's not necessarily very helpful. What it is not is a list of the best universities in the country. Many of the best universities in the country are members of the Russell Group, but they are not members in and of themselves because of the quality of education they provide. The criteria for being a member of the Russell Group University is your research output. Now, quite often that correlates quite closely to the calibre of teaching a university is offering, but it's not necessarily synonymous. There are a number of universities that will not comply with the Russell Group's rules or are not interested in doing so. St Andrews has been invited to join several times and has turned it down on every occasion. The University of Bath is a really excellent university. It's quite often in the top 10 of university rankings, always scores extremely highly for undergraduate teaching quality and student satisfaction. But because it doesn't have a very large postgraduate facility and it has a very low research output, it's not eligible to join the Russell Group. Does it mean it's a worse university? Does it mean it's somewhere you shouldn't consider applying? Absolutely not. It very much is an excellent undergraduate university. But if you fixate on the Russell Group, you might overlook Bath as an option. If you think about the universities that are in the Russell Group, you've got institutions such as Queen Mary's, for example. It's a good university, but it's not as good as St Andrews and it's not as good as Bath or Loughborough, all of whom are external to the group. So yes, it's a recognisable brand. It's a helpful shorthand, but don't obsess about it. And don't be blind to the fact that some of the universities you might associate as being very, very desirable are outside of it, and some of the universities that you might find less appealing are within it. I mentioned league tables a couple of times in that last slide, and this is something that I think causes more angst and stress amongst students and their parents than almost any other part of the decision-making process to determine which universities you want to apply to. The problem you've got is really twofold. Firstly, there are lots of different tables that come up with slightly different answers. And the reason they come up with slightly different answers is that they're measuring different things and they're weighting different criteria in different ways. Some of those criteria will no doubt be really important to you. Others are perhaps less significant. So you might feel that employability upon graduation is really key for you, or you might feel that student satisfaction and high quality teaching is key for you. There are league tables that reflect that. But there are other league tables that are much more interested in things like the size of the endowment, the university's finances, the quantity of research it does, that as an undergraduate applicant you might not think is as important or as significant. So when you're looking at league tables, look at what they're measuring. Think about how that relates to your experience, how that will relate to your degree. Another thing to bear in mind is that you will find both international and domestic league tables. The international league tables tend to focus on a set of criteria that favours universities that offer a broad range of subjects. So a university like the London School of Economics, which is a centre for excellence in its field, will not score as strongly in an international ranking as it will domestically. The final thing to bear in mind is this changes. There are some perennial trends. You are going to see Oxford and Cambridge near the top of most league tables in most years. You are going to see most of those Russell Group universities populating the top 30 in most years. But there are annual fluctuations. Just because a university was 7th last year and has fallen to 14th this year doesn't mean that it's suddenly become a worse university. It just means on this set of criteria, on that year, and that snapshot, it hasn't scored quite so highly. The margins between the rankings are very, very small, particularly at the top. Do not let this sway what you are doing or what you're thinking. In my opinion, the way to view league tables is a source of information, a sense check on what you are thinking, something that gives credibility to your opinion on a university. It should not be the centre of your decision-making process. Another thing to consider when you're choosing your universities is, well, what style of city, what style of university do you want to be in? And there are three main kind of versions of a university in the UK. The first are the collegiate universities, Oxford, Cambridge and the University of Durham. They are broken down into approximately 30 constituent colleges, and you are a member of that college. You live there, that is your community, you will eat there, you will be provided with accommodation there. Probably most of your socialising will take place in that environment. In the case of Oxford and Cambridge, your teaching will also take place, particularly in your first year, via the medium of that college. Collegiate universities are great if you want to be part of a big community, but also have that smaller community to centre your life in, to feel grounded and feel connected to a more manageable group of people. You've then got your campus universities. Now, these tend to be the ones that are out of the centre of town, either in the suburbs like Birmingham, which is in Edgbaston, just up by the cricket stadium, or further out. So somewhere like Warwick or Kiel is very much separate and very much removed from a town centre. They're self-contained communities, there's space, usually excellent facilities, usually relatively modern. Typically they have shuttle buses that run you backwards and forwards to the town, so you're not completely isolated, but you do have that sense of space and sense of closed community that you can really enjoy being a part of. And finally, you've got your city universities. A majority of universities in the UK fall into this category. These are universities in the heart of British cities. The London universities are almost all in this bracket. Your UCLs, your LSEs are absolutely in the centre of town. And also most of the other universities. If you're into the kind of University of Bristol, Birmingham, Manchester, Nottingham, Sheffield, those Russell Group red bricks are almost all city centre universities. You have all of the advantages of being part of a city centre community when it comes to socialising, when it comes to amenities, and yet you also have a university building and a university community within that as well. Oxbridge has had a few mentions during this presentation so far, and I will talk a little bit more about it now, but please do also be aware that we have a whole separate webinar that looks at how to apply to Oxford and Cambridge. It is a different process in many ways. There are other things you need to consider, and it does stand alone as a separate set of information. So if you do want to make an application to Oxford and Cambridge, I would really recommend that you have a look at that webinar. But for now, here are some of the basics. So they start with UCAS. Anything you hear today is going to apply to an Oxford or Cambridge application. You have to submit a UCAS form. They are going to be one of your 5 choices. But then there's other things that you need to do. First of all, you can only apply to Oxford or Cambridge. You have to make a choice. Secondly, you've got to submit your whole UCAS application earlier to meet their deadline, which is the 15th of October, rather than the following January. And the final thing you need to think about is that most successful applicants start that process early. I would strongly recommend, if you want to be successful in achieving admission to Oxford or Cambridge, that you are beginning to seriously think about it from really the beginning of year 12 onwards. And the reason I say that is because there are other things that you need to do beyond that UCAS form. You have to prepare for submitting work if you're an arts subject. For most subjects, you will need to sit an admissions test. And if you are successful in those hurdles, you will be called to interview. And all of the development required to support applicants to complete each of those hurdles successfully takes time. And certainly when we're working with clients, we feel that the more time we have to support them and to develop those skills, the more likely they are to be successful in their outcome. Medicine applications, again, another slight variation on the UCAS theme, and in some ways quite similar variation to the Oxbridge one. Again, we have another webinar looking at this. So if you are thinking, I really want to study medicine or dentistry, then please do also have a look at that. The first thing to note with medicine is that, again, it's that early deadline, 15th of October. The second thing to note is that it is extremely competitive. And it's extremely competitive because you need to be able to perform at a variety of different criteria beyond simply submitting a good UCAS form. They are going to expect to see work experience. They're going to expect to see that you have an understanding of the NHS. They're going to require you to sit either a UCAT or a BMAT. This is the last year of the BMAT, but the UCAT will become the standard admissions test. You are going to have to sit an interview, and there are different types of interviews that you need to be prepared for. And you also need to be aware that you can only send 4 choices for medicine. Your 5th UCAS choice has to be a non-medical option. If you are watching this and you are in year 11 and you have yet to make your A-level choices, please think very carefully about what you pick if you are thinking of studying medicine, because there are some restrictions and there are some requirements that the different universities are looking for. Again, though, like Oxbridge, in many ways the UCAS is the starting point. So again, everything that I'm going to say today is going to be relevant and helpful for you to make a successful application for medicine. So, one of the first things that you need to decide is what course you want to study, and that's really central. when you're looking at UCAS. And the reason it's really central is because you are applying for a program. And if any of you are familiar with the US university system, this is very, very different. In the US, you apply to a college. You are gaining admission as an individual. In the UK, you apply for a course. So if you're applying for history, you're gaining admission as a potential historian. If you apply for maths, you're gaining admission as a potential mathematician. So in terms of how you prepare and how you develop your application, that starting point has to be knowing what you want to do. And course choice is really important, and it's something we spend a lot of time working with our clients to determine that they're making the right choice. Some people come to us knowing exactly what they want to do. Others will come to us having a vague idea, but they're not entirely sure. And others will have no idea at all. And we work through that with them. We sense check what they already think they know. We suggest other options that they might like to consider. And we make sure that the choice is really, really informed, well-grounded, and is helpful both in terms of what you want to do and your future career or your enjoyment of your degree, but it's also helpful in terms of being strategic in relation to the admissions process. Now, there are 3 phases of really working that out. First of all, understand the options. A lot of people don't realize how much choice there is out there when it comes to university courses. There will be subjects that you've never studied before. Just because you haven't studied anthropology at school doesn't mean that you wouldn't enjoy studying anthropology at university, for example. There are also combination degrees. You might think, well, look, I really like business. Business is my favorite A-level. I want to study business at university. But have you thought about business with entrepreneurship or business with digital innovation? There are variations. Or you might be a little bit indecisive. This was very much my experience. I liked politics. I liked history. I couldn't choose between the two. So a joint honours programme that allowed me to study both was really, really helpful. I think a lot of parents come into this with quite clear-cut preconceptions of what courses are good or better and what courses perhaps are less significant. I would caution against going too far in that direction. What matters much more to most employers in most scenarios is where you went to university rather than what you studied. Now, there are exceptions to that. If you want to be a doctor, you need to have studied medicine. If you want to go into a career in research science, you need to have studied a science degree. But if you're looking for the more kind of general jobs in business, in the law, even in careers in the kind of the City of London or banking or things like that, then fundamentally where you went to university is going to matter much, much more. So if you're looking at it and you're thinking, well, I am a very, very strong linguist and I'm an okay economist and I might get into Oxford or Cambridge to study French, but I probably am not going to get in to study economics because my maths isn't so great, I would recommend that you go to the best possible university you can. And in that scenario, studying French would be your best option. There is always a balance between where you want to go and what you want to do. But think about it strategically and think about what is going to matter most to you in terms of your medium and long-term outcomes. There are lots of different courses, as I said. The key advantage, I think, of the UK system is that you can specialise in your chosen subject or subjects from day one. Again, if you're watching this with a kind of American outlook in mind, hugely different. You are not being forced to do any kind of general ed in your first year. You pick your subject and that's what you do. A majority of the programmes in the UK are single honours. You pick a single subject, including the vocational ones. Those vocational subjects like medicine and law are available as undergraduate courses. Again, that's quite different from some other parts of the world. There are also predefined combinations of courses. So business with Spanish, history with politics. Sometimes there are 3 courses that form a predefined combination. The most famous of which is the PPE degree, historically designed at Oxford, philosophy, politics and economics, but now offered by a range of universities. Ultimately, though, whatever you pick is going to have a significant impact on your application. What you're going to do to prepare, how you're going to write your application, and quite possibly where you're going to apply. Not all universities offer all courses, and not all universities offer all courses to the same standard. And this is, again, a bit of a nuance on those league tables. There are some universities that are excellent for certain things and not so great at others. If I was thinking, for example, that I wanted to study materials science, Loughborough would be one of my first choices. It has a fantastic material science department. However, if I wanted to apply for history, it wouldn't be near the top of my list. There are many other better universities for that degree. So making sure you've got that idea of what you want to study being finalised and being confirmed alongside that idea of where you want to study it is a really helpful way to approach it. I think it's worth also having a little bit of a discussion here about the IB and British universities. So when we're thinking about applying for universities, and certainly when you look on the university website, the first thing you're going to see when you click on the slide that says entry requirements is A-levels. They are the standard currency in the UK because most students study them. And universities will say things like you need A star AA or AAB to come to this university. Sometimes in brackets they will put including a specific subject, but generally it says 3 headline figures. If you scroll down a little bit and look at the small print, you'll also see that it looks at other qualifications. And probably the second most important qualification in the UK, certainly the second most popular, and one that is very, very useful for an awful lot of international applicants to understand is the IB. And the IB is viewed in a slightly more complicated and more nuanced way than A-levels by universities. In theory, you can convert via something called UCAS tariff points an A-level to an IB. You can add up what an IB score looks like. That will give you a UCAS tariff. You can add up what a combination of 3 A-levels looks like. That gives you a UCAS tariff, and you can convert them. Universities don't often convert the IB and A-levels in an exact way based on the tariff. So what they tend to look at are their own specific requirements and their own specific approach to the IB. Now, some universities really, really like the IB and will generally have lower offers for IB students than they do for A-level students. A really great example of that is King's College London. It's typically A star AA to AAA for the A-level students. If you're looking at an IB offer, it would typically be 35 points. That is a very favourable conversion. If you're looking at Cambridge, for example, the conversion's not so favourable. A star A to A star AA is the typical offer for an A-level student. You would be looking at somewhere between 41 and 43 points as the standard for an IB student. That is much less favourable. Universities can also be a little bit more expansive in terms of what that requirement is. So you will almost certainly see a total point score that you need to obtain. And then quite often there are other things, as you can see on that slide. You might be told that you must get a total number of points in your higher levels. It could be 18, 16, 17, something like that. UCL is very fond of an offer that looks like that. A lot of universities will specify particular higher level grades. So 36 points plus 666 in your higher levels, or 36 points plus 766 in your higher levels. That's a slight direction that King's have gone down. So they said that total points offer that they tend to put forward is relatively low, 35, but they will have quite higher level requirements, typically 766. They might specify, depending on the degree, what level or what route through maths you need to have. So some courses will say you must have higher level maths. Some will say you must have higher level A&A. Others will say you must have standard level A&A. Typically, it's only courses that require any level of numeracy that are going to route down into what level of maths you're doing. If your degree does not involve numbers, then there will be absolutely no requirement to have a specific level of maths. 1 or 2 universities will require just higher level requirements. So the Royal College of Veterinary Science, for example, doesn't offer a total point score. It just says that you need a certain combination of 3 higher levels. And finally, universities can just put in the odd specific grade requirement. So it could be 36 points, but you must get a 5 in standard level maths. It's much more nuanced. It needs a little bit more understanding, and it needs a little bit more unpicking in some ways. But fundamentally, this is a system that most universities really value, and a system that most universities are trying to make fair in terms of the entry requirements. Interpreting those entry requirements then. As I was saying at the beginning of the last slide, you go on the website, you click entry requirements, and it comes up with information. Those entry requirements are the standard entry requirement, and that's usually the phrase that's used to publish it. For some universities, they equate to a minimum if you are looking at the most competitive end of the market. So if you're looking at Oxford or Cambridge and you open the Oxford website and it says, right, you need A star AA to study this degree, most applicants will be getting in excess of that. That is not the case for a majority of universities. For a majority of universities, what you are looking at is a set of grades that they would like candidates to achieve. And this is where we get into this slightly complicated and pretty unhelpful game that universities and schools have been playing. And really what we're seeing is the relationship between predicted grades and entry requirements becoming distorted, and both sides are contributing to that. So when you look at universities, a lot of people basically rank their desirability or perceive their desirability based on the entry requirements, i.e., you open the list and it says, right, this university has 3 A's, this one requires AAB, the one with 3 A's must be more desirable. So the following year, the university that was asking for AAB thinks, well, we'll get more applicants, we'll be considered more desirable if we move our grades up to AAA. Now, no university will consider or push forward an application from a student who is not meeting those standard entry requirements in their predicted grades. So schools respond by increasing predicted grades to allow students to access the offers from the university. As a result of that, we now live in a world where only about 1 in 6 predicted grades are accurate and 3/4 are lower than teacher estimations, and only 1 in 10 is higher. So predicted grades are often over-exaggerated. Entry requirements are often over-exaggerated, and on results day, you are near miss, but the university in most cases will adjust accordingly because they simply don't have enough applicants that have the entry requirements. And we're now in this slightly ridiculous arms race scenario. And the reason we're in this arms race scenario is no one really acknowledges the fact that there needs to be a sense of reality within the system. But because they're not acknowledging it, there are a couple of things you need to take away from that. Firstly, that your predicted grades are likely to be a positive expression of your likely outcomes. But secondly, a lot of universities will have some wriggle room if you don't meet the stated entry requirements on results day. Where there is no wriggle room is if you don't have predictions that meet the stated entry requirements. And I would strongly urge anyone applying to a British university to not bother wasting one of their 5 choices on a university that is asking for something that you cannot deliver in terms of your predicted grades. So the next phase of this webinar is to look at the process. You know what you want to do, you know where you want to do it. Well, how do you actually go about filling in your UCAS form? So first of all, let's introduce you to UCAS. UCAS is the University and College Application System. It's a single common online application system for dealing for all of the universities. One form, one application is sent to all 5 choices. And UCAS follows a very set regimented timeline. It opens in May. It starts accepting submissions from September. If you're a medic or an Oxbridge candidate, your deadline is October. The deadline for everybody else is January. Most universities will reply sooner, but the deadline for them to respond to you is May. And then should anything go wrong on A-level results day, clearing is open and available for you to access. The earlier you start this process, the more successful you will be. So although this is very much looking at a process that is predominantly located in that final year of high school, your year 13, your upper 6th, you should be starting to think about UCAS far earlier in the process. You should be starting to think about it at the beginning or the middle of year 12 at the latest, rather than leaving it to the timeline shown on this window. The UCAS form then, divided into a number of sections. Some of these are very basic and very straightforward, and some of these require a little bit more thought and can be approached in a more strategic manner. The first thing that really must be approached in a strategic manner, and this is something we spend a lot of time talking to our clients about, is what your 5 choices look like. Some of that's going to come down to personal preference. Where do you want to be? Where do you want to study? A lot of it comes down to academic standards. Those predicted grades must match those standard offers. You get 5. We would recommend that you pick 2 that are aspirational, 2 that are a little bit more secure, and 1 that is more of a safety choice. And the reason we're saying that is because ultimately you need to end up with a firm and an insurance choice. And your insurance choice needs to have grades requirements that are lower than your firm. Now, depending on what your grade profile is, that will vary. I've known people who have very successfully had, for example, Oxford or Cambridge as a firm choice, and then somewhere like UCL or LSE as an insurance choice. All of those grades are very, very high, but those candidates have very, very strong academic profiles. It might be that you feel much more uncertain about your outcomes, and you might want a really aspirational first choice, but you might want a little bit more security on your second choice. So you might be thinking, right, I'm going to put Imperial College London as my first choice, but I want an offer that doesn't require me to get a 7 in higher level maths as my insurance. So maybe I'm going to look at somewhere like the University of Birmingham with a much bigger gap. That's all going to be nuanced and down to your personal circumstances. But making sure you have a range and making sure all of those choices are well considered, well researched, and places that you want to go is really key. The personal statement then is going to be abolished, and really depending on how old you are and when you're planning on applying, what I'm going to say here is going to be very different. So for the next cycles, it's still the normal 4,000 character personal statement, a single block of prose to write what you want to about yourself. UCAS, however, have decided that that's an access impediment, and a lot of people simply don't know what to write and aren't being given the guidance that they need. So they are considering breaking it down into 6 questions rather than one single unprompted piece of prose. In practice, that change is likely to have very little impact on a well-advised applicant. You're going to write the same things, you're just going to break it down into predefined paragraphs rather than doing it in a more free-form way. I was involved in the consultation process when they were talking about doing this, and they are very, very much wanting to help people write a good personal statement. That is the objective. And although they haven't announced what the questions are going to be, you're going to see things like explain why you want to study the subject, what you've done to support that, what you've enjoyed in your school curriculum that you feel prepares you for university study. It's going to be questions in that kind of direction. Now, until that reform actually occurs, we are still left with that free-form 4,000 character personal statement. And there are 3 things that you need to address. Firstly, why do you want to study your chosen subject? And this should be about your academic interest in the subject. Do not go down the line of because it's going to give me a career that I want. So the worst thing you could possibly say if you're applying to read economics, for example, is that you want to be an investment banker. You need to think about what you want to get out of the degree itself. Remember, the person reading this is an academic. They are devoted to the subject. They are interested in the subject. They don't want to know that you want to earn your millions in the city as a banker. They want to know that you want to engage and enjoy the subject for 3 years while you're studying it. Secondly, what evidence do you have to show your aptitude and your interest in that subject? What have you done? What have you read? What have you engaged in? What have you thought, crucially? This isn't a list of, I've read this, I've done that, I wrote the other. It's very much, I've read it and I've thought this and I've considered this. And unpicking and developing that is really, really important. For all the clients we work with, we develop something called an academic development plan that focuses on exactly this. What could you do to show your interest that goes beyond your school syllabus? What could you read? What essay competition could you enter? What MOOCs could you participate in? What podcasts could you listen to? And we encourage you not only to watch and read those things, but to really engage and start to develop your opinions. That is really, really key to writing a good personal statement. Finally, you're going to mention your extracurriculars. And this is a potentially slightly controversial statement because I know many of you will do extracurriculars to a really high level and they will take a lot of time and a lot of dedication. To a university application process in the UK, they are not that significant. And they're not that significant for a number of reasons. Firstly, if they do not directly relate to the degree, they are not showcasing your ability to study that degree unless you really signpost it. So I would say divide your extracurriculars into 2 categories. What relates to what you want to do? So if, for example, you're applying to study international relations and you're a big fan of Model United Nations assemblies, well, that's brilliant because that directly relates. And there are things that you can show from that MUN experience that shows your interest, your aptitude, and your inclination to study international relations. But let's say we've got the same candidate, and that candidate also plays the flute and has grade 8 on the flute. Well, the flute per se doesn't necessarily give a huge amount of insight into why that candidate wants to study international relations, or indeed why they might be good at it. But there are skills that you can draw out: the dedication, the practice, the commitment. All of those things are transferable skills, and they should be signposted. Having said all of that, non-directly linked extracurriculars should not account for more than 25% of any personal statement. And if you're applying to the most selective universities, it should account for significantly less. Ultimately, the more academically selective the university is, the more the focus of the personal statement needs to be on the academics. The reference then is something that you can't control. The reference is written by your school. It is divided since 2024 into 3 sections. 1, your school will publish a short statement about the school, including how they generate predicted grades. Secondly, they will detail any extenuating circumstances, and I would always encourage candidates to be open and honest about this. It's never going to be used as a reason for not admitting you. It can be considered to help mitigate some academic criteria that perhaps have been impacted, and it can certainly be used to make sure that your experience at university is positive. But there is nothing to be gained by lying, and there's nothing to be gained by disguising the truth. And thirdly, they write a reference. They support your application. Now, that reference must be wholly positive. I would strongly recommend that if you have any control over who writes it, that you pick someone who A, knows you very well, and B, knows you in the context of the subject you want to study. So if you're applying to read chemistry, your chemistry teacher is the best person to write that reference. Try and encourage your referee to avoid kind of cutting and pasting statements from other teachers. Yes, they want to draw in their opinions, but it's very, very obvious if you get a reference that is literally the physics teacher says this, the biology teacher says that, the chemistry teacher says the other. And actually it tends to be quite repetitious as well, because what you're good at in biology is probably also what you're good at in chemistry, and so on and so forth. It should be pulling out your skills, your attributes. It should be grounded in precise evidence. You did this and they saw that. Almost all referees I know are very happy to work collaboratively with a student. If you know who your referee is going to be and you go up to them and you say, well, sir, I'd really like the university to know that I did this. I've run out of 4,000 characters in my personal statement. Would you mind putting it in my reference? Teachers are generally very, very happy to do that. 1, because they want to help you create the best application that you can. And 2, because fundamentally, that makes their life easier. If you're writing a reference and you're trying to think, do I know 4,000 characters about this student? Some really easy to do, others less so. So if someone's giving you extra information, that's a really good thing. It's a real positive thing for the referee. Ultimately, a good reference not only doesn't contradict the rest of the application, but it actively supports it in a way that doesn't repeat it. So try and work collaboratively, try and have that dialogue, show your referee your personal statement as you go, ask them about, would you mind including this? And you'll get a much more positive document. Another aspect then of the UCAS form that will be dealt with by your referee is entry of predicted grades. Predicted grades then are set by your school. All schools will have their own way of doing it. All schools have to declare that in this new style of reference. They are entered by your teacher. You need to know what they are before you make your university choices, because obviously you need to meet the standard entry grades. But I think you also need to be aware that most schools operate of kind of accurate optimism as the kind of oversight of what a predicted grade is going to be. They are looking at the best case scenario to facilitate offers. But with that in mind, you need to think about what your insurance options look like. You're not guaranteed to get your predicted grades. We know that across the UCAS landscape at large, a lot of students don't. So see them as being aspirational, see them as something you need to work towards, see them as being something in line with your most aspirational choices, rather than being a guaranteed outcome. Potential other hurdles do take place though. There are a number of exceptions to the idea that it is just a UCAS form. Most universities and most courses, it is just the UCAS form. But if you are looking to apply to a number of social science courses at some leading universities, so Oxford, UCL and Warwick, you might be asked to sit something called the Thinking Skills Assessment. If you are looking for law at most competitive universities, you will have to sit the LNAT. which is the National Aptitude Test for Law. If you are thinking of medicine or dentistry, you will need to sit the UCAT, which is another skills-based test looking to assess your suitability for medicine. There are a number of highly selective maths courses that will require you to sit STEP papers. If you are looking to apply for fine art, design, architecture, you will almost certainly need to submit a portfolio. And if you are looking to apply for medicine, dentistry, veterinary medicine, art, architecture, and a small number of other courses, including all Oxford and Cambridge degrees, you will be required to sit an interview. Anything else, anywhere else, it is exclusively UCAS. But there are these exceptions, and if you are applying to one of those universities, you need to be prepared to perform strongly against whatever that criteria is. Understand the test, score well on the test, know what the portfolio requires and make sure you deliver it, and practice and be able to deliver strongly in the interview. Where we feel that we add value and we support our candidates to achieve the best possible outcome is by working really closely on these additional hurdles when they apply, to make sure that they enhance rather than detract from the quality of your application. So, you've filled in your UCAS form, you've worked on your personal statement, you've spoken to your referee, and you've clicked send. You might now have also sat a test or submitted a portfolio if that's required. You are then going to be in a position where you're going to receive some offers. Now, offers tend to arrive at some point between the date of submission and kind of Easter. The later you send your application, typically the later your offers will come. Some universities won't send anything at all until we get to the 31st of January, which is the standard deadline for most applicants. The deadline for them to respond is May, but most will do it earlier than that. And most people will receive conditional offers, i.e. you can come to this university to study this course if you get X, Y, and Z in whatever qualifications you are sitting. One or two universities will make unconditional offers. That is most common for the fine art degrees, the kind of portfolio-based courses where actually that matters much more than your attainment in your A-levels. Some universities might also say that you have different conditional requirements if you put a university as your firm choice than if you put it as your insurance choice. So university might say, right, well, it's AAA if we're your kind of insurance choice, but it would drop to AAB if we became your firm choice. You need to think about that. You need to think about what the terms of the offers are. Read the small print very carefully. Are there particular higher level requirements for IB students? Do you have to get a particular grade in a particular subject if you're an A-level student? And ultimately, you can then think about, in that informed place, picking that firm and picking that insurance choice. You've got your offers. You've picked your firm choice. You've picked your insurance choice. You then wait till results day. And results day will give you 4 scenarios. And there are scenarios here that are more desirable than others. But circumstances dictate that sometimes A-levels or IB exams do not go exactly as you want them to. And it's important that you think about what these scenarios look like and how you would respond to them. Best case scenario then, you've met the terms of your firm choice offer, your place is automatically confirmed, you're off to your chosen first choice university. That is very much what we want for all of our clients, if at all possible. The second scenario is you've not met the terms of your conditional offer, but your firm choice university wants you anyway. That's what I was saying about that kind of arms race dynamic. They've put down an offer that's higher, it's in line with your predicted grades. You haven't quite got your predicted grades, but they're going to drop the offer as well. So let's say the offer was A star AA, you got AAA, you're going anyway. Still, fantastic outcome. You might not have met the terms of your firm choice university, and they might not want to take you under those circumstances, but you have met the requirements for your insurance. You are then automatically going to that university. As I said, picking your insurance choice is still really, really important because there's a chance you're going to go there. If something has gone very, very wrong and you haven't met the terms of either your firm or your insurance choice, then you will be released into clearing. And clearing is basically a system whereby all of the university vacancies are available. If you rewind 20 years, 30 years to the era where most of the parents listening to this presentation would have been applying to university, clearing was very much the lowest of the low universities. There was nothing in it that would have been deemed desirable. That's just not the case anymore. Yes, not every university and not every course is available in clearing, but you will frequently see really aspirational universities like Warwick, like Durham, Bristol, with vacancies in clearing. And it's very, very straightforward if you are getting the approximate offer terms to get a Russell Group place through clearing. Yes, it's not desirable and no one should be planning on using this as an option. But if something has gone wrong, say you've been unwell, your A-level results haven't gone according to plan, do not feel that the world is over if you go into clearing, because if you are proactive and you act quickly, then there are some really good offers to take place. We make sure that we are available to our clients on results day, because starting early, making sure you're making the right telephone calls at the right time to the right people is key to getting the best possible outcome if anything has gone wrong. And I would strongly, strongly recommend that you make sure that for A-level or IB results, you are in a position where you can access advice and guidance from your school or a third party, and that you're not, for example, out of reach and out of contact on holiday, because it has to be done on the day itself. So, you know what you've got to do. You know where you want to go. Hopefully, this has kind of informed you as to what that application process looks like. This comes the final part of our presentation then. Well, how do you maximize your chance of success? How do you do all of the things we've talked about better than everybody else? If you're applying for a competitive course at a competitive university, there may be 15 or 20 other well-qualified applicants competing for that place. How do you stand out? Well, there are a number of things that I think you can look at, and that's what this final section will examine. So first of all, understand your academic credentials. The more you understand about your profile and what the universities you're applying for are looking like, and how that matches, the more likely you are to achieve a place. So universities will look at a number of different academic criteria. They'll look at GCSE grades, they'll look at your predicted grades, and they'll look at your subject choices. You can't obviously change your GCSE grades. You only have so much agency over your predictions. And if you're looking at this in year 12 or beyond, your subject selections are already fixed. So you're really looking at matching. Don't ignore what it's saying. If a university is saying you must have A-level biology and you haven't got A-level biology, do not apply, because they simply will not acknowledge your application. You will not progress to having your personal statement read, for example. Different universities are more rigid with things like GCSE grades. Understanding is important. There can be information on their websites, or speak to someone who knows about it. Speak to your teachers, speak to someone like us. We can help you determine what your profile is a good fit for. More broadly than those academic credentials, you've got that academic profile. I talked about this earlier. You need to be able to sell your academic interest in that subject. In most cases, in the personal statement. In some cases, also in admissions tests, through submitted work, and through an interview. The more you can do to show a sustained and developed interest in your subject, the better. The obvious one is reading, be that books, be that articles, but there are so many other things you can do as well. Think about your extracurriculars. Think about the ones that could link to your activities. I talked about MUN and international relations, for example, but something like debating and law would be equally good. There are lots of things that schools offer that give you the opportunity to develop skills that directly relate to degrees. If maybe reading is not something you enjoy, think about listening to your information. There are so many radio programs and podcasts. I would strongly recommend the BBC Radio 4 website. They have all kinds of documentaries on all kinds of different things. It's very easy to access. On the way to school, put your headphones in. You can listen to something. If you are doing something else, you're in the gym, you can listen to it. It becomes a much more relaxed way to gain information. There are some brilliant podcasts. If you're applying to do politics, you should definitely be listening to The Rest is Politics with Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell, for example. If you want to be a bit more proactive, sign up and do a MOOC, mass online course. All kinds of different subjects offered by all kinds of different universities. Some are really light touch, some are more sustained. If you say, look, I did 6 weeks of a MOOC looking at ancient Greek literature, that's going to look great if you're applying to read classics. You might attend a course, you might watch a documentary, you might go to an exhibition. There's loads of things you can do. We would work with all of our clients to come up with a bespoke plan that plays to your strengths and shows you your interests and directs you towards things that we think are most suitable and most helpful for you. But if you're not working with us, use this as a starting point and start Googling. See what's out there. As long as you're doing something, and as long as you are prepared to talk about it and engage with it and crucially reflect on it, then that's going to enhance your application. The next thing I would say in terms of maximizing your success, think about a clear strategy. You're making 5 choices. Each one of those needs to be carefully considered. I've seen too many students in the past think, right, well, I know my first choice, I know my second choice, the other 3 don't really matter. That's not necessarily the best way to look at it. You need to think about all 5 carefully. Understand their admissions criteria, but also understand that there might be a bit of a gap between what is written and what the reality looks like. So some hard facts are written down and universities adhere to them. There are other things that are written down, but universities are perhaps more flexible or slightly more nuanced in their approach. So when a university says you must get A star AA to come here, we might know from our experience that actually on results day 3 A's will be enough. And you can't guarantee that, but you can certainly suggest that's a strong outcome. We might know that a university says, well, further maths is desirable, and you might not have further maths. And we might be able to say, well, yeah, I know they say desirable, but over 90% of applicants have it. So therefore, you are at a significant disadvantage. So talking to someone who has an understanding and has experience of this process is really important to make sure that you are making good strategic decisions that will enable you to select the right firm choice, your ultimate goal. We want people to get into that ultimate goal. We've placed 95% of our students at that ultimate goal, but also that there is a plan B, and that plan B is considered and something that you would be happy to do. If you are one of those students who ends up in their insurance choice, make sure it's somewhere that's going to make you happy. Personal statement then. Understand the reforms if you're going to be affected by them, but remember you're selling yourself. I don't think the British are very good at this. I think maybe our friends across the Atlantic are better at it, but you are putting across your best possible version of yourself against those criteria of why do I want to study it and why would I be good at it. Make sure you demonstrate and evidence your skills. Make sure it's precise, thought through. It's not a list. It should be your reflections. It should be personal to you. And consider the fluidity of your expression. I know that's probably easier if you're English, history, that kind of end of the academic spectrum, than maybe if you're maths or physics. And the criteria against which that's being assessed are going to be different. You don't have to write like William Shakespeare if you're applying to read maths at university. But it does need to be fluent. It does need to be coherent. And even if it's being read by a mathematician who perhaps also doesn't have the greatest fluidity of expression, you'll sell yourself more effectively if your personal statement does. So get help. Talk to people who do write better than you do. Talk to people who perhaps do have skills when it comes to making persuasive arguments. That could be an advisor, it could be a teacher, it could be a parent. If we work with clients at Path, we will make repeated drafts, repeated suggestions, and keep working on that personal statement until it is absolutely perfect and tailored to reflect you and also tailored to reflect the needs of your chosen university. The more you can get that match, the more likely you are to achieve success. The reference. As I said previously, make it collaborative. It should complement, not contradict or repeat. If you can see your reference as another 4,000 characters to tell your university why you're wonderful, that is the best way to do it. Sometimes there are things that you would like to sell in your reference. There are things you want to say about yourself that you just think, oh, this is a bit awkward, this is a little bit braggy. The reference is a great place to put it. So above and beyond anything else, I would say see it as a collaborative process. Talk to your referee. We can provide guidance to the people we are working with if they have referees who perhaps are uncertain about what to write or how to do it. We have both written guidance. We talk to referees as well. We're very happy to liaise with our clients in terms of helping them to select the right referees, but it's an important part of the process. Your reference, unless it is significantly raising a concern, is unlikely to cost you a place, but a well-written and effective reference can certainly help you get one. So, general tips. Think ahead. Make sure you plan your A-level and IB choices. That's going to have restrictions. Make sure you're working over a long period of time to expand your subject knowledge, and start early. The earlier you come to this process, the earlier you start doing all of those background things, those thought processes, that academic development, the more effective your application is going to be. The earlier you send it, the earlier you are likely to start to receive offers. So I hope you found that useful. It is very much an overview. As I said, if you're thinking Oxbridge or medicine, then please do listen to the specific presentations on those areas, because that will go into an awful lot more detail about what you as individuals need to do. If not, and you are thinking general UCAS, but you'd like to find out more or reach out to us, then please do look at the caption below. There's a link to our website, and you are very welcome to book a free individual consultation with me, and I can talk to you about the specifics of your UCAS application to make sure that you are maximising your chances of success. Thank you very much.